You know that feeling. You're sitting in your car on a random Tuesday, waiting for the engine to warm up, and you open your brokerage app.
You've been doing this for 3 years.
You set up the auto transfer. You skipped the expensive vacations. You did exactly what every financial guru on the internet screamed at you to do. And you look at the balance. You put in $10,000 of your own blood, sweat, and tears, and the market gave you, what, maybe $800? You stare at that number, and this cold, quiet realization washes over you. You are never going to be rich. You feel like you're doing something fundamentally wrong. But here is the twisted part. You aren't doing anything wrong. You are just the victim of the biggest, most pervasive lie in the entire personal finance industry. And it's a lie built around a picture. You know the one. That beautiful, sweeping graph that every financial influencer waves in your face. The curve that starts out flat for a second and then rockets straight up to the moon. They tell you to just start early. Put in $50 a week, let compound interest do the heavy lifting, and you'll wake up a millionaire. It sounds so easy, right? Like magic. On the surface, this makes sense. But in reality, that graph is a psychological trap. It is actively destroying your motivation. And it is the exact reason why incredibly disciplined, hardworking people are still dead broke in their 40s. What almost nobody realizes is that compound interest has a minimum threshold, a speed limit you have to break before the magic actually happens. But nobody tells you about the flat part of the curve. They love to throw around that little thought experiment. You know, the one where a penny doubled every day turns into $5 million in a month. I hate that example. I really do. Because 100% daily return isn't investing. That's a fairy tale. In the real world, you are fighting for 7, maybe 8% a year if the market is having a good run. And when you are working with small numbers, 8% is functionally invisible. Let me tell you about a guy I know. We'll call him Dave. Dave is 31, makes about $65,000 a year. Good guy, works incredibly hard. A few years ago, Dave decided he was going to get serious about his future. He sat down at his kitchen table, printed out his bank statements, and cut his lifestyle to the absolute bone. He stopped going out. He canceled subscriptions. He squeezed $300 a month out of his paycheck and funneled it straight into an S&P 500 index fund. For 2 years, Dave lived like a monk. He missed out on dinners. He drove a car with a rattling transmission, all because he was trusting the graph. He was waiting for the snowball to roll. After 24 months of absolute sacrifice, he had put in $7,200. His account balance? $7,600. He made $400. I remember him looking at me, genuinely crushed, and he said, "I gave up 2 years of my life for $400? I could have made that driving Uber for 2 weekends." And this is the part that should worry you, because Dave didn't lack discipline. Dave lacked scale. When you invest $100 and make 8%, you make $8. $8 doesn't change your life. It doesn't even buy you a decent sandwich anymore. But the gurus keep preaching, just start, every dollar counts. And while they mean well, it papers over a brutal, mathematical truth. When you are below a certain net worth, compound interest is basically a myth. You are just saving slowly, linearly, and painfully. You are on the flat part of the curve, dragging a boulder up a hill, wondering why gravity isn't helping you yet. And this is where most people get it wrong. They look at that miserable $400 of growth, and they think they picked the wrong stock. They think they need to be trading options, or buying crypto, or timing the market. They think the strategy is broken. But the strategy is perfectly fine. The problem is the size of your base. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's right-hand man, famously said that the first $100,000 is a bitch. Excuse my language, but that's what he said. And he didn't mean it just emotionally. He meant it mathematically. The first 100,000 is a massive vertical concrete wall. Below that wall, you are the engine. Your sweat, your strict budget, your hustle. That is the only thing moving the needle. The market is barely a participant in your wealth creation. But above that wall, something shifts. If you have $100,000 invested and the market goes up 8%. You make $8,000. Now, that $8,000 goes to work and makes you another $640 the next year, just by existing. You start waking up on random Thursdays and realizing your portfolio made more money while you were sleeping than you made at your actual job that day. That is the threshold. That is when the graph finally bends. But here is where everything starts to break. The uncomfortable, ugly truth that nobody wants to say out loud is that most people never make it over the wall. Not because they are lazy, not because they buy too much avocado toast, but because the advice they are given is fundamentally mismatched with the reality of the economy. If you look at the actual data, the median retirement savings for an American household nearing retirement is hovering around $185,000. Half of the country spends their entire working life, 40 solid years, and they barely get past the flat part of the curve. By the time the math finally starts to work in their favor, they are already 65 and pulling the money out to pay for medication. And Dave? Dave didn't make it. The psychological weight of seeing no real progress broke him. He felt insulted by the market. His friends were posting pictures from Europe. Guys on TikTok were claiming they made $20,000 a month dropshipping, and Dave was sitting in his apartment staring at $400 of interest. So, he quit. He pulled the $7,000 out, bought a slightly nicer car to feel better about his life, and completely reset his timeline. He wiped out his base. This is the silent tragedy of personal finance. The math, when done honestly at the beginning, is deeply demoralizing. And because nobody warned you about the 10 years of invisible progress, you feel like a failure and you tap out. But I want you to look at someone who played the game differently. Let's talk about Elena. Elena is the same age as Dave, makes similar money, but she understood the mechanics of the wall. She knew that trying to budget her way to $100,000 on a $65,000 salary was like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. She didn't have a spending problem. She, like most of the country, had an income problem. So Elena stopped obsessing over the $3 she spent on coffee. She stopped staring at the compound interest calculator. Instead, she became ruthlessly focused on one single metric: the velocity of her shovel. If the base of her wealth was the pile of dirt, she needed a bigger shovel. She realized that below the compounding threshold, every single dollar of extra income matters exponentially more than a dollar of saved expenses. You can only cut your budget down to zero. You can't live on air. But your income ceiling? That can go infinitely higher. Instead of spending her weekends agonizing over coupons, Elena spent 6 months learning a high-income skill online. She started taking freelance project management contracts on the side. It was grueling. She was exhausted. But the extra $1,500 a month she was making wasn't going toward a lifestyle upgrade. It was being violently shoved into her investment accounts. She wasn't relying on the market to build her wealth. She was using her own human capital to force-feed the portfolio. And this is the part that should really make you stop and evaluate your own strategy. How much mental bandwidth are you wasting trying to optimize a portfolio that only has $12,000 in it? How many hours are you spending researching the perfect ETF allocation when you should be figuring out how to increase your market value at your job? Elena didn't just aggressively increase her income. She did something else that is absolutely vital, something that Dave completely ignored. She protected the base like her life depended on it. You see, the biggest enemy of early stage wealth isn't inflation. It isn't a market crash. The biggest enemy is the random Tuesday when your transmission blows up, or you need a root canal, or your company decides to downsize. If you don't have a massive, boring pile of cash sitting in a regular savings account to act as a shock absorber, every emergency becomes a wealth-destroying event. You are forced to sell your investments, pay the taxes, pay the penalties, and drain the account down to zero. And every time you do that, you don't just lose money, you lose time. You reset the compounding clock back to day one. Elena kept $20,000 in cash, doing absolutely nothing, earning practically zero interest. Her friends told her she was losing money to inflation. But Elena knew that cash wasn't an investment. It was armor. When her car broke down, she paid for it in cash, and her investment portfolio remained completely untouched. The compounding engine never stopped running. I want you to really think about the psychological warfare of this journey. You are fighting an uphill battle against your own biology. Your brain is wired for loss aversion. It feels the pain of sacrificing your current lifestyle twice as intensely as it feels the pleasure of a distant, abstract retirement. When you are sacrificing your present for a future that doesn't seem to be getting any closer, your brain screams at you to stop. This is why you have to stop looking at the end state graphs. Stop comparing your day 2 to someone else's year 20. The financial industry shows you the hockey stick curve to sell you their products. They don't show you the long, grueling, completely horizontal handle of that hockey stick. If you want to survive the flat part of the curve, you have to change how you measure success. Don't look at your investment returns. When you are under $100,000, your returns are irrelevant. Look at your savings rate. Look at your absolute net worth. Throw a private celebration when you hit $10,000. Go out to dinner when you hit $25,000. Not because the compound interest is doing anything special at that level, but because you are successfully laying down the pavement. Think of your wealth like a runway. A massive 747 airplane doesn't just lift off the second you hit the gas. It needs thousands of feet of flat, boring, perfectly paved asphalt. It rolls, and it feels like it's never going to fly. But every single foot of that runway is absolutely critical. Because if you run out of pavement before you hit the required speed, the plane crashes into the trees. You are laying down the runway right now. Every extra hour you work, every side hustle you start, every time you negotiate a raise and invest the difference, you are pouring concrete. It's not sexy. It's not going to make you TikTok famous, but it is the only way to get the plane off the ground. And this is where the regret usually sets in for people. I see it all the time. People hit their late 40s. They realize they are still on the flat part of the curve, and the panic takes over. They realize they spent 20 years trying to frugality their way to wealth, instead of aggressively attacking their income. They realize they let an unexpected medical bill wipe out their progress because they didn't respect the emergency fund. They realize they quit when they were only halfway through the hardest part. Don't be that person. You have the advantage of knowing the truth now. The compounding minimum is real. The first 100,000 is a wall. It is not fair, and it is rigged to reward the people who already have money. The bigger your base, the easier the game becomes. The smaller your base, the harder you have to swing the hammer. But the wall is climbable. It requires a brutal, clear-eyed assessment of your reality. You cannot passively ride the market to your first major milestone. You have to drag yourself over it. You have to decouple your ego from your current lifestyle, look your income in the face, and demand more from yourself. The next time you open your brokerage app and you see that tiny, almost insulting amount of growth, I don't want you to feel defeated. I want you to feel dangerous. I want you to look at that number and realize that the market is daring you to quit. It is trying to shake you out. Close the app. Go figure out how to make an extra $500 this month. Throw it on the pile. Protect it with a cash buffer. And keep laying the runway. Because one day, and I promise you this happens faster than you think once you cross the threshold, you are going to wake up, check your phone, and realize the plane just left the ground. And once you are in the air, the rules of gravity completely change.